Give it to me. Now. It belongs to my family, and I will not stand here arguing with a doorman." That was the first thing the gentleman said, and he said it across the lost property counter with the flat certainty of a man who had never in his life been refused anything that mattered. I was 3 steps behind Lyle at the time, coming back to the gate desk with the night log under my arm, and I heard the whole of it before I saw the man's face. Lyle did not raise his voice. He never does. He set both white gloves on the edge of the worn oak counter, looked the gentleman square in the eye, and said the 6 words that decided the next 2 hours of all our lives. "No claim without proof, sir. Procedure. I am Corporal Aldous Wren, and that morning I was the relief gateman at the stable court entrance of Caro Palace, the small east gate where the household's lost property point sits in a stone alcove just inside the arch. It is not a grand post. There are no crowds at the stable court gate, no tourists with their phones, no parade. It is a working door staff coming on shift, deliveries, the laundry vans, the gardeners with their barrows. And tucked into the alcove beside it, behind a counter so old the grain has gone black at the corners, is the place where everything found inside the palace walls comes to rest until its owner is found. Umbrellas, spectacles, a child's mitten, a ring that slipped off in the washroom, a wallet dropped on the great stair. Trooper Wystan Lyle had stood that counter for 9 years. He knew the post the way a man knows the back of his own hand. I had not expected trouble there. You expect trouble at the front gates at the rope lines where the loud ones come to be seen. You do not expect it at a lost property counter on a quiet Tuesday. But the gentleman at the counter was not quiet, and the thing he wanted was already lying in the open in front of him, catching the cold morning light through the arch. A gold pocket watch, an old one, heavy and worn smooth, its chain pooled beside it on the green felt. "I can describe it," the gentleman said. "It is gold, it has a chain, it is plainly an antique. There, I have described it. Now hand it over before I find someone who understands who I am." "That isn't a description, sir," Lyle said. "That is a guess any man could make looking at it from where you stand. The book asks for the things a man cannot see from the wrong side of the counter." I came up level with Lyle then and set the night log down, and I got my first proper look at the man. He was perhaps 60, silver at the temples, in a coat that had cost more than I make in a season, with a steward's gala pass clipped to his lapel, gold-rimmed, the kind they give the patrons and the great donors, not the staff. A patron, then. One of the men whose names are read aloud at the charity dinners, whose money keeps a wing's roof on. He had the bearing of it. And behind him, hovering, was a younger man in a dark suit with a tablet under his arm, an aide, or an assistant, the sort who exists to make telephone calls and clear paths. "My name," the gentleman said, and he said his name as though it were itself the proof, "is Sir Marius Holt. I am on the patrons' committee for tonight's gala. I have given to this house for 30 years, and that watch was my father's. It went missing this morning from the cloakroom of the long gallery where I left my coat, and it has plainly been handed in here by some honest servant who did the right thing, for which I am grateful. So we are agreed it is mine. Now I am late, and I would like it back." It was a good speech. It had the shape of truth in it, the way the best false things do. A man leaves his coat, a watch slips from the pocket, an honest soul hands it in, and here it is. That story fit. And Sir Marius Holt was not a cartoon, not a bully red in the face. He was worse than that in a way. He was reasonable. He was patient the way powerful men are patient with people they expect to give way. He believed every word he said. I would stake my pension on it. He believed that watch was his because it was unthinkable to him that it might not be. Lyle let the speech sit a moment. Then he drew the lost property book toward him, a real ledger, cloth-bound, the entries in a dozen hands going back years, and turned it so the open page faced the gentleman, though he kept one glove flat on the watch. "It was handed in 11 minutes ago," Lyle said. "By a footman, off the back stair, not the long gallery. He found it on the floor of the service corridor by the old music room, which is at the other end of the house from where you say you left your coat. That is the first thing that does not sit, sir. But I am not calling you a liar. People misremember a morning. So we will do what the book says, and the book is fair to everyone, including you." "The book," Sir Marius repeated, as if the word tasted of dust. "The book," Lyle said. "When a thing of value is claimed, the claimant tells us what we have not told him. Marks, numbers, what is inside. An honest owner knows the inside of his own watch, so." He did not lift the watch. He did not open it. He kept his glove flat over the case, hiding the back of it, hiding the face. "Tell me what is engraved inside the back cover, sir, word for word. And then it is yours, and I will apologize for the delay, and you will make your committee with time to spare." I watched Sir Marius Holt's face when Lyle said that, and I have thought about it many times since. There was a flicker, just one. The smallest hesitation, gone almost before it came, and then he covered it with anger, because anger is what powerful men reach for when they have been asked a question they cannot answer. "This is absurd," he said. "I am not going to be quizzed by a sentry at a side door about my own property. Do you know what a man like me could do to a post like yours? One telephone call. One. I sit at table tonight with the people who decide whether men like you have a job in the morning." He turned to the aide. "Get the duty manager. Get whoever runs this farce. I will not stand here." And then to Lyle, lower, the way a man speaks when he means it most. "Hand me the watch, soldier. That is not a request." "It is an order I can't follow, sir," Lyle said, and his voice did not change by a hair. "The watch stays in the book until its owner proves it. That is the whole of my duty here, and I'd rather lose the post than the duty. Tell me what's engraved inside and we're done." The arch went quiet except for the cooing of the pigeons up in the stonework, and the far-off rattle of a barrow on the cobbles. The aide had drifted off toward the inner court, tablet up, already making the call. Sir Marius Holt stood very straight, and his color was high now, and I understood that we had passed the point where this would end in a minute with an apology. He was not going to walk away. Men like him do not walk away from a closed door. They send for someone to open it. And I will be honest about what I felt standing at Lyle's shoulder. A small cold voice in me, the voice every man in service knows, said, "It is one watch. Give it to the rich man. Maybe it is his. He has a gala pass and 30 years of giving, and the watch fits his story well enough, and a footman could be wrong, and is a side door counter really worth a man's career on a Tuesday morning. Hand it over, and the morning goes back to being quiet." I looked at Lyle. He had not moved. His glove was still flat on the gold, and I knew he had heard that same cold voice in himself and had simply set it down, the way you set down a thing you have decided not to carry. He had asked the man one fair question. The man would not answer it. To Lyle, that closed the matter as surely as a locked door, gala pass or no. "Wren," Lyle said quietly, not turning his head. "Log it, time, the claim, the name he's given, and ring the keeper of the lost property. By the book, a contested claim goes up to the keeper. Let's get her down here before this gentleman's telephone call gets ahead of us." I picked up the gate phone. Sir Marius Holt heard the word keeper, and something in him eased a fraction. He thought, I could see it, that the keeper would be a sensible person, a manager, someone who would understand who he was and overrule the soldier. He thought the system was about to rescue him from the system. He could not have been more wrong. The keeper of the lost property at Carrow was a woman named Mrs. Edith Carroway, and she had run that counter and its rules for longer than Lyle had been alive. Most of the house had never met her. She lived in an office 2 floors up with the registers and the strong boxes and a single window that looked out on the kitchen yard, and she came down only when something was contested. Which is to say, she came down rarely, and when she came like weather. While I waited for her on the line, I told her the bones of it in 10 words: a gold watch, a patron claiming it, no description offered, and she said only, "I'll come," and put the phone down. That was Mrs. Carroway. She did not waste breath on a stair she was about to walk down. In the minutes before she arrived, things moved exactly as Sir Marius Holt had arranged for them to move. His aide came back across the court with a man in tow, Mr. Pell, the gala's events manager, a harried fellow with a lanyard full of passes, and the look of a man whose whole morning was already on fire. Pell took one glance at the patron's face and one glance at the gala pass on his lapel and went pale, and he did exactly what frightened middle managers do. He started apologizing before he knew a single fact. "Sir Marius, I am so sorry, there's clearly been a misunderstanding. This is Trooper. Surely we can just— this is one of our most valued patrons. The watch is obviously his. Can we not simply return the gentleman's property and let him get on with his day?" He half reached for the watch himself, across the counter, the way a man reaches to smooth over a thing he wishes would go away. Lyle did not move his glove. He did not even look at Pell's hand. He looked at Pell's face. "You can't authorize it, sir," he said. "With respect, you manage the gala, you don't keep the lost property book, and you can't sign a contested item out of it. Only the keeper can do that, and only on proof. If you take that watch off this counter, you'll be the one explaining to her where it went and on whose word. Is that what you'd like the morning to be?" Pell's reaching hand stopped in the air. You could see the calculation cross his face. The fear of the angry patron in front of him weighed against the fear of a process he suddenly remembered existed, and a keeper who was, even now, coming down the stair. He drew his hand back. He had been about to do the easy thing, the thing that made the shouting stop, and Lyle had simply named the cost of it out loud quietly and let the man do his own arithmetic. That is a thing I have learned watching the best of us at a gate. You do not have to win the argument. You only have to make the easy wrong thing more expensive than the hard right one, and then stand still while the other man chooses. "This is intolerable," Sir Marius said, but he said it to Pell now, having given up on Lyle. "I have never in my life been treated as a suspect for laying claim to my own father's watch. I want this man's name, his number, and the name of his commanding officer. By tonight I want a letter of apology, and by next week I want him moved to wherever it is they send soldiers who cannot tell a gentleman from a thief." "My name is Trooper Whiston Lyle," Lyle said, perfectly even, and he gave his number too, the long string of it, without being asked twice. "My officer is Captain Margate of the Stable Court Watch. Corporal Wren here will have logged the whole of this, your claim and my refusal both, so there's no need to remember it, it's written down. I'd want it written down, sir, if I were you, before a keeper and a telephone log and a footman's statement. Written down is fair to everyone, even to a man who's lost a watch." I had logged it, every word, and there is a particular silence that falls over a man who has been threatening someone, when he realizes the someone has been calmly helping him build the very record that will be used to judge which of them is right. Sir Marius Holt fell into that silence, and into it walked Mrs. Edith Carroway. She was a small woman, gray-haired, in a plain dark dress with a chain of keys at her waist and a register tucked under one arm, and she came through the arch without hurry and without the smallest sign of being impressed by anyone present. She set her register on the counter beside Lyle's book. She looked at the watch on the green felt. She looked at Sir Marius Holt and at his gala pass, and at the events manager ringing his lanyard, and at me with my pen still wet, and last of all at Lyle, who came to attention a fraction and said, "Contested claim, ma'am. Item handed in 11 now 19 minutes ago by a footman, found in the service corridor by the old music room. Claimant is Sir Marius Holt, patron. Claimant states it is his late father's, lost from the long gallery cloakroom. Claimant declines to describe the interior engraving. I've held the item in the book pending your ruling." "Quite right," said Mrs. Carroway, 2 words, but I watched them land on Sir Marius Holt like cold water because they were not aimed at him. The keeper had heard the whole posture of the thing, the patron, the threats, the manager's panic, and her first 2 words had gone to the soldier. Quite right. The system he had summoned to rescue him had arrived and immediately, without raising its voice, stood beside the man at the counter. "Now then," she said, turning to the gentleman with a courtesy that was real but had a floor of granite under it. "Sir Marius." I am the keeper of this house's lost property, which means that watch is, at this moment, in my charge, not the troopers and not yours. I am sure you are exactly who you say you are, and I am grateful for your years of generosity to this house. None of that has the smallest bearing on the next 5 minutes. The book asks every claimant the same question, and it has asked dukes and it has asked deliverymen, and it does not care which a man is. So I will ask it once plainly, and I do hope you'll answer, because I should very much like to hand you your father's watch and be back upstairs before my tea is cold. She paused. What is engraved inside the back cover? And there it was again, the flicker. Longer this time because there was nowhere left to take it. Sir Marius Holt looked at the watch, and at the keeper, and at the small gray woman who was entirely unafraid of him, and the high color in his face did something I will not soon forget. It did not deepen into rage. It thinned. It went, for just a breath, into something like the look of a man standing on a stair that he has just realized has one step fewer than he counted on. I have not opened it in years, he said. It is my father's. I knew it the moment I saw it. The chain, the weight, it is exactly his. You cannot expect a man to recite an inscription he last read as a boy. I expect nothing, said Mrs. Carroway gently. The book expects it. That is different, and it is the whole reason the book exists. Anyone can want a beautiful old watch, sir. Only its owner knows it's inside. She did not reach for the case. She let it lie under Lyle's glove. Try, a word, a name, the shape of it. I am not unkind. I will take a true fragment over a confident silence. He tried. I will give him that he tried, the way a man tries a lock with a key he is fairly sure is the wrong one. To my son, he said. It will say something to my son. From my father to me, a date. There will be initials. He was watching her face as he said it, the way a man watches the dealer's eyes, looking for the tell that he had guessed right. He was not describing a watch. He was describing what such a watch ought to say, and Mrs. Carroway's face gave him nothing at all. No, she said quietly, that isn't what's inside this one. She had not opened it either. That is the part Sir Marius Holt could not get past, I think, in the moment. She had ruled against his guess without lifting the case, because she did not need to. A footman handing in a found watch describes it to the keeper's clerk on the slip, and the slip rides up with the item, and Mrs. Carroway had read the slip on the way down the stair. She knew what was inside that watch before she ever reached the arch. She had let the gentleman guess not to trap him, but to give him the fairest possible chance to be telling the truth, and he had failed it on his own, with his own mouth, twice over, in front of witnesses he himself had summoned. To my son. There was nothing in this watch about a son. I would learn what was in it soon enough, and so would the whole arch, and it would put a stillness over us that the gala manager would remember to his last day. But before that, the telephone call came. It came as I had known it would, because Sir Marius Holt's aide had been making it for the last quarter hour, drifting at the edge of the court with the tablet at his ear, and the sort of man who can summon Mr. Pell can summon others. What came across the cobbles now was not a manager. It was the Comptroller's office, or rather a young man from it, a Mr. Daunt, sleek and quick, the kind of household official who carries the weight of the Comptroller's name and uses it like a borrowed coat. He came up to the counter with the brisk look of a man sent to make a problem disappear, and he had clearly been told only one half of it. Sir Marius, he said warmly, taking the patron's hand, I'm so sorry you've been delayed. The Comptroller sends his regards and asks me to sort this out at once. Now. He turned to Lyle, and the warmth dropped a few degrees into the cool, smooth manner of a man pulling rank without seeming to. Trooper, I understand a found item is being held over a small misunderstanding. Sir Marius is a treasured friend of this house. I'm authorizing the return of his property to him now, with the house's apology for the inconvenience. Please hand it over. I'll sign whatever needs signing. And here is the thing that the whole morning had been building toward, the thing I want any man who hears this to understand. A higher official, sent by the Comptroller, had just given Lyle a direct order to surrender the watch. By every reflex of service, that should have ended it. You obey the man above you. That is the bone and marrow of a soldier. Sir Marius Holt's mouth had already begun to relax into the small smile of a man who has finally reached the level where things get done. Lyle came to attention, and he did not move his glove. "Sir," he said to Daunt, "I can't hand it to you either, and I'll tell you why, so it's on the record same as the rest. The keeper of the lost property has charge of this item, not me and not you. By the house's own standing order on found valuables, the one over the counter there, signed by the Comptroller's own predecessor, a contested item leaves the book only on the keeper's ruling, and only when the claimant has proved title. The claimant hasn't proved title. He's been asked twice and guessed wrong twice. If you order me to sign it out against the keeper standing right here who says no, then one of two things is true. Either you outrank the standing order, in which case I'll need that in writing from the Comptroller himself and not his regards, or you don't, in which case I'd be handing a stranger another man's property on your say-so, and that's a thing I will not do for any voice, however high it comes from. Which is it, sir? I have served 11 years. I have never heard a man refuse an order so completely while standing so perfectly within his duty that the order had nowhere to land. Lyle had not defied the household. He had held it up like a mirror. He had said, in effect, "I am obeying the Comptroller, his standing order, his rule, his system, more faithfully than you are, and if you wish to overrule the Comptroller, do it in the Comptroller's name and in writing, and I will obey that too." He had taken the borrowed coat off Mr. Daunt's shoulders and laid it on the counter and asked him to prove it fit. Mr. Daunt was no fool. That was his salvation and Sir Marius Holt's undoing. A fool would have shouted. Daunt went very still, and his quick eyes went from Lyle to the iron-faced keeper to the lost property book lying open with my fresh ink in it, and I watched the borrowed weight of the Comptroller's name slide off him, as he understood that he had been sent down to bless a thing he had not been told the shape of. He had been told a patron's watch was being withheld by an officious sentry. He had not been told that the patron could not say what was inside it, that the keeper had already ruled, that every word of it was logged, that a footman's sworn slip placed the watch at the wrong end of the house from the gentleman's coat. He had walked into a clean record built by a man who wanted everything written down. "I see," Daunt said slowly. He looked at the keeper. "Mrs. Carroway. Has the claimant described the item to your satisfaction?" "He has not," said Mrs. Carroway. "He has guessed at it twice and both times been wrong. The trooper has handled this entirely correctly, and I will say so to anyone, including the Comptroller, including the gala, including a court if it comes to that." Her voice did not rise. It simply closed every door behind it as it went. "I am not in the business of taking watches from the people who lost them and giving them to the people who shout loudest. Neither, I think, is the Comptroller. That is rather the point of having a keeper at all." Daunt turned back to Sir Marius Holt, and the warmth was entirely gone now, replaced by the careful, cooling courtesy of an official extracting himself from another man's mistake. "Sir Marius," he said, "I think the simplest thing and the thing most likely to clear your name is for you to tell the keeper what's inside the watch. If it's your father's, you'll know, and then it's yours, and we'll all apologize, and you'll dine tonight with a good story. If you can't," he let it hang, "the way men in his trade let things hang, then I'm sure you'd agree the house must find the person who can before it parts with the thing. You wouldn't want it any other way, not a man of your standing." It was deftly done. He had given the gentleman a ladder down, prove it or stand aside, with honor either way, and he had aligned the Comptroller's office, quietly and entirely, behind the soldier and the keeper. The system Sir Marius Holt had summoned to come and overrule the man at the counter had arrived in force, looked at the book and arranged itself, one office at a time, behind the man at the counter. The event's manager, the keeper, the Comptroller's own deputy, each had come ready to make the rich man's problem go away, and each, on being shown the plain facts written plainly down, had instead stepped into line behind the rule. That is what a good rule does, I have come to think, standing as many gates as I have. It does not need the man at the counter to be brave alone. It lets the whole house be brave together, because every honest person who looks at it sees the same fair thing and cannot, without shaming himself, pretend not to. Lyle had not won by being immovable. He had won by being right in writing, so that everyone who came to move him had to choose, out loud, between the record and the shouting. And one by one, the honest ones chose the record. Sir Marius Holt looked at the watch a long moment. And then, for the first time, his shoulders came down, and the patron's certainty went out of him. And what was left was an older man who had wanted, very badly, for a beautiful thing to be his. "I cannot tell you what is inside it," he said low. "I have never seen the inside of it in my life." The arch was very quiet. Even the pigeons seemed to have settled. "My father had a watch like this," he went on, "and now he was not ordering anyone, he was just a man talking, and it was harder to listen to than the threats had been. Gold with a chain worn smooth the way this one is. He carried it every day of his life, and he promised it to me, and when he died I was abroad, there was a falling out. You needn't hear all of it. When he died it wasn't in his effects. My brother said it was lost. I never believed him. For 11 years I have walked into rooms and looked at old gold watches and thought, that's it, that's the one. He found his way back to me. And this morning I came through the long gallery, and I heard there was a gold watch handed in at the east gate, an old one, just like." He stopped. "I told myself it was his. I am 61 years old, and I wanted it to be his so much that I stood here and ordered you to give me another man's father and called you a doorman for refusing. He did not finish that either. He looked at the watch as though it had become something else, something that hurt to see. It isn't his. His said something inside, I'm sure. I just never read it. I only ever saw the front of him, the front of the watch. I'm not making sense." He was making perfect sense. That is the thing about the false claims that fool a man. They are so rarely a thief's lie. More often they are a true grief, reaching for the wrong object in the dark and certain it has found the right one. Sir Marius Holt had not come to the counter to steal. He had come to it carrying a hole in him 11 years deep, and a gold watch had fit the shape of the hole closely enough that his whole formidable will had risen up to claim it. He had been honest in the only way that matters in the end. When the rule finally cornered him, he told the truth and did not let another man bear the cost of his wanting. "Thank you, sir," said Mrs. Carroway, and there was no triumph in it. "That was honestly said, and it cannot have been easy. I'm sorry for your father's watch, truly. But this one isn't it, and now we know that for certain, which is worth a great deal, because it means somewhere in this house there is a person who has lost the watch that is theirs and is missing it this very minute. The book has done its work. It kept your hands and theirs both safe. Trooper," she looked at Lyle, "you may open it now, for the record, so the corporal can log the engraving exactly. And then we shall go and find the soul it belongs to." Lyle lifted his glove at last. He turned the watch over in his white-gloved fingers as carefully as if it were a living thing, and he pressed the little catch, and the back cover sprang open with the small clean sound such things make. He looked at what was engraved there, and something moved in his face. Lyle, who did not move his face for a thrown threat or a borrowed controller, something moved in it now, and he read it out into the quiet of the arch in a voice gone suddenly careful. "It says, 'To Tom, who kept the time for 40 years so the band would never miss a beat, from all of us with love,' and a date." He told the date. It was a long way back, and under it smaller a name, the Carrow Palace Band. And under that smaller still 2 words, "Play on." I wrote it all down. My hand was not quite steady. "To Tom, who kept the time for 40 years. A bandsman. Not a patron, not a lord, not a man with a gala pass. A musician who had kept the beat for the palace band for 40 years and been given a gold watch by the men he played beside, and somewhere in this house today had lost it." "The band," said Mrs. Carroway softly. "The old music room. That's where the footman found it, the service corridor by the old music room. It never came near the long gallery at all." She looked at Sir Marius Holt, not unkindly. You see why the wrong end of the house mattered, sir. It was telling us where it came from the whole time. We just had to listen to the watch, instead of to the loudest voice in the room." Sir Marius Holt nodded. He had nothing left to say, and to his great credit, he did not try to find anything. He simply stood, a diminished and more human figure than the one who had come ordering, and waited to see what the house he had threatened would do next. What it did next was this. Mr. Daunt, who an hour before had come to make a patron's problem vanish, now took out his own phone and rang the household office and asked, politely, in his own name and not the controller's borrowed one, for the records of the Caro Palace Band. Mr. Pell, the gala manager, who had nearly handed the watch over to make the shouting stop, now went off at a half-run to the old music room himself to ask whoever he could find there whether a man called Tom was missing a watch. And Mrs. Carroway sent her clerk up for the pension rolls, because a man who kept the time for 40 years and was given a leaving gift had, she reasoned, very likely left. And a man who has left is found not in the band room, but in the book of those the house still cares for. The watch lay open on the green felt under the cold light of the arch, and we waited, and one by one the people who had come to break the rule worked now to keep its promise, to put the right thing back into the right hands. The system had not rallied to crush Sir Marius Holt. It had rallied to find Tom. It did not take long. A house keeps better records of its own than of anything else. Within half an hour Mr. Daunt came back across the cobbles with a single sheet of paper, and a face that had gone gentle in a way I had not thought that quick, smooth man capable of. He laid the sheet on the counter beside the open watch. "Thomas Bream," he said, "timpanist and bandmaster's deputy of the Caro Palace Band for 41 years. Given a gold watch on his retirement by the band. There's a note of it in the old welfare ledger, a subscription they all paid into. He passed 2 winters ago." Daunt paused. "But his widow is on the house pension rolls, Mrs. Annie Bream, and she's in the house today. She comes every month to the welfare office to collect the small annuity the band fund still pays her, and to sit a while in the old music room, where she's let in by arrangement. She was signed in at the staff gate at 8:30 this morning. She's likely sitting there now." The old music room, the service corridor beside it, where a footman had found a gold watch on the floor not an hour before. I have stood a great many gates and seen a great many things come and go through them. I am not a soft man. But I will tell you that when Mr. Pell brought Mrs. Annie Bream up the cobbled court to the arch, a small woman, perhaps 80, in a good plain coat she had clearly kept for years, leaning on a stick, with her free hand pressed flat to the front of her coat, the way a person presses a hand to a place that aches, I had to look at the stonework for a moment and study it very hard. "They tell me," she said when she reached the counter, and her voice was steady, but it was the steadiness of a woman holding herself level on purpose, "they tell me a watch has been found, a gold one. I had it out this morning in the music room to give it its winding. I do it every month where he used to sit. It feels like, and my hands aren't what they were, and I dropped it and it rolled, and I couldn't find it on the floor for all my looking, and I thought," her hand pressed harder to her coat, "I thought I'd lost the last of him." Mrs. Carroway did not hand her the watch. Not yet. She was the keeper to the very end, and she was fair to the very end, and being fair to Annie Bream meant the same thing it had meant to Sir Marius Holt. One question, the same for everyone. "Mrs. Bream," she said, very gently, taking the old woman's free hand in both of hers, "I think it's yours. I think it's been yours all along. But I have to ask you what I ask everyone, and you'll forgive me, because it's the very rule that kept it safe for you this hour. There is something engraved inside the back of the watch. Can you tell me what it says?" And Annie Bream smiled, a small, wet, certain smile, and she did not even glance at the watch on the felt. She did not need to. She had it by heart the way you have by heart the things that are written on the inside of your own life. "To Tom," she said, "who kept the time for 40 years so the band would never miss a beat, from all of us with love. She gave the date without a falter, the same date Lyle had read out to the day, and under it the name of his band. And then at the bottom the smallest 2 words that the second flute put on after the rest had had their say, because Tom always said it to the young ones when they fumbled a passage and wanted to stop. He'd tap his stick and say it. Her voice cracked just once and held. "Play on. It says play on." For a moment no one in that arch breathed. Then Mrs. Carroway lifted the gold watch from the green felt, closed the back of it with that same small, clean click, and folded it into Annie Bream's waiting hand, and pressed the old woman's fingers shut around it with both of hers. "It's yours, my dear," she said. "It always was. Welcome home to it." I have thought since about everyone who stood in that arch when the watch went into the right hands. I think of Mr. Pell, who had nearly handed it away to stop a shout, watching now with his lanyard forgotten and his eyes bright. I think of Mr. Daunt, who had come to make a problem vanish and had stayed to find a widow. I think of Mrs. Carroway, the granite woman, who had been gentle exactly when gentleness could be afforded and not 1 second before. And I think of Sir Marius Holt. He stood the whole while a little apart, and he watched Annie Bream close her hand around the watch that he had ordered a soldier to give him, and I saw on his face no anger at all anymore, only a kind of recognition, one grieving person looking at another and understanding, at last, completely. When Mrs. Bream had her watch and her tears and was being settled into a chair the gala manager hurried to fetch, Sir Marius crossed to her, and he bowed to her, an old-fashioned bow from the waist, the kind men of his world keep for the people they most respect. "Madam," he said, "I owe you an apology you'll never know the half of. I tried to take that watch this morning. I told everyone it was my father's. It was a foolish, grasping thing, and I'm ashamed of it, and the only good in it is that I have just watched what a house looks like when its people refuse to do the easy wrong thing." He glanced at Lyle, and then at me, and then at the keeper. "Your Tom was given that watch by men who loved how he kept the time. I think the people in this house keep their honor about the same way. Steady so nobody misses the beat." He straightened. "I'll be giving rather more to the band fund this year if they'll have it from a man who behaved as I did, for Tom, and for play on." Annie Bream looked up at him, this great patron who had tried to take her husband from her and then bowed to her, and being the kind of soul she was, she patted the back of his hand once and said, "He'd have liked you, I think. He liked anyone who came round in the end." Which is the most generous thing I have ever heard one person say to another, and it undid the last hard thing in that arch entirely. Sir Marius Holt made his committee meeting after all. He went to his gala that night a quieter man, and the band fund did indeed receive, within the week, a gift large enough that the welfare clerk read the figure twice. Mr. Daunt, I'm told, mentioned the morning to the Comptroller in person, and the Comptroller had the standing order on found valuables read out at the next assembly of the household, and added a line to it in his own hand, which now hangs framed above the lost property counter at the stable court gate. No claim without proof, and no proof refused for any rank, however high or however low. Trooper Wystan Lyle was back at his counter within the hour, the night log squared away, the book closed and locked, the green felt brushed clean. He did not speak of it then or after. When I told him, days later, that half the house was calling him the man who stood down a controller's office over a stranger's watch, he looked at me as though I'd said something faintly ridiculous, which, to him, I suppose I had. "I didn't stand anybody down," he said. "I asked a man a question the book asks everyone, and I waited for the answer. That's the whole of it." He set his gloves on the counter flat, the way he had over the gold that morning. "A gate isn't worth anything if the man at it will open it for whoever shouts loudest, and a counter's no different. The book doesn't know who's rich. That's not a weakness in the book, Wren. That's the entire reason it's worth keeping." I have stood a great many posts since, and I have thought about that more times than I can count, on the slow nights when the easy wrong thing comes calling in a fine coat and tells you, reasonably, that surely the rule needn't apply to a man like him. It always needn't to the man asking. That's how you know it must. Somewhere in a small flat not far from the palace, an old woman winds a gold watch once a month, where her husband used to sit, and the engraving inside it still says what it has always said. To Tom, who kept the time, so the band would never miss a beat. Play on. We do. That is what the man at the counter is for.